Hello everyone, my name is Coca Sexton. I don't really know why I feel like I need to introduce myself at this point, but I do it anyway. This is video number 5 if you're keeping count. Today I want to talk to you about something that is very basic, but I think it's one of those things that repetition is the mother of skill. And it's this: how are you identifying, connecting, and engaging with your audience? What systems, what platforms are you using? How are you listening to your buyers to identify trigger events that you can go into and engage with? How are you then connecting with these decision makers as they're self-educating and asking questions online or within groups or in other fashions? How are you finding ways to connect with those individuals? And then what are you doing to actually drive that engagement? Because it's one thing if you can find the decision makers. You know, if the decision makers are online, they're talking, they're updating their profiles, they're doing other stuff, that's great. You can identify them, you can search them out. Then it's a matter of connecting with them and actually following them on Twitter, sending them a connection request on LinkedIn, what have you. But ultimately what you're trying to do in this basic framework is to drive engagement, because the activity, as we know as sales professionals, activity is what drives that business decision to get made. You have to have consistent and relevant and valuable information. And that comes to the very final point of this: identify, connect, engage, and then add value. So what is the best way to add value? There's many ways you can do it, and I'm not saying that there's only one super way or magic bullet. But what I have found time and time again in my career is, how do you amplify the messages that are going to resonate? As professionals, we're typically not creating a lot of content. You're not making videos. Maybe you are. You're not writing blog posts. You're not doing things that are going to attract a very wide audience. But hopefully, your marketing team is doing this for you. Hopefully your marketing team is actually producing content that is going to be relevant and valuable to these decision makers and help them move through a buying process. If your company's not doing it, I'm promising you, in your industry, there are analysts and researchers that are also producing this content. And what you should find ways to do is collect this information and then find ways to distribute it. And that's what I mean by amplifying it. From your mobile phone, you have the ability to have curated content fed to you, and you can basically just decide, I want to share that one's not interesting, that these two things are great, and you can actually schedule this stuff out through your social profiles so that you can get to work during the day, but things are constantly dripping through your social networks to keep your buyers educated and to expand your reach and to identify new connections that may be engaging with that content. So how are you amplifying those messages? Now, a lot of people, when they come to me and talk about employee advocacy or amplification of content, they want to understand the strategy behind that. And again, every strategy is going to be different, but at a very high level, what I've always suggested is this: when you are building out an employee advocacy or a content distribution or a sales enablement type platform that is curating content for the professionals, the salespeople in this case, to share, you have to think about it from the buyer's point of view. Now, most companies think that it's okay to just pack in as many white papers and ebooks and other content that the company has created that puts the company in the best light possible. And that's good. Like, that's content that you definitely want to get shared out there. But many companies overlook this idea of, hey, as a sales professional, how am I sharing just useful information that isn't about my company, or maybe not even about my industry, but I still want to be seen as an expert in a space or somebody who is thoughtful in this market by sharing engineering content, marketing content, thought leadership, management skills, this type of content that most other salespeople still have a very hard time curating on their own. So if you want to make an employee advocacy or an amplification strategy work, you have to think about it in these two different buckets. You have to think about, how are we going to get the right content that we've produced as a company into the hands of our salespeople to share, but what else are they interested in sharing? What else is our market, our buyers going to be interested in? Are they interested in SEO content, for example? Then fine, let's find a bunch of content that talks about SEO that doesn't relate to our company that our salespeople can then share. You get the point. I digress. The main point here is that if you can build a culture of sharing within your organization, the impact is felt globally. And this is one of those key tenets, or those, main points that I talk to about in this area of social selling is content is the fuel for this. And marketers need to find ways to enable and empower their sales teams to curate this content in the right fashion so that they can share it and schedule it for their audiences. And that's the only way that this is going to work. Now, again, identify, connect, engage, and then add value. And one of the best ways to add value is to find the best content, the best research, the best analyst reports, the best other insights that are valuable to these decision makers to help them, one, self-educate, but also position yourself as being an expert in this space. That's it. You have a good day.